So we're also live on YouTube now. And I once again welcome everyone. We'll take another minute to start. I think we'll wait till 3:30. We have 25 odd participants on Zoom and another 10 on YouTube. So before we start, Vivek, how's the day going? How's the weather in Chandigarh? Solan is chilly, and I'm surprised, ma'am, you're not wearing a sweater. But how's it in Chandigarh?
Chandigarh is warm. It's a little cool for the last 3 days compared to before, but it's still warm in the daytime. It rained day before, and it's a pleasant day overall. But just from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock, it's a little warm.
I guess the heat is going to start building up now.
Yeah, it's required. I think it should get warmer. The mangoes will get sweeter.
You bet. So I think we should start. It's sharp 3:30. So good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, teachers and our dearest ma'am, Singha from MRDAV Solan. It's an honor for us to host this webinar. Just for all the teachers over here, when I met with ma'am Singha, I got to know that we went to the same school and I happen to be a year senior to her. So my name is Atul Khosla. I am one of the founders of Shulini University. And I'm also the Pro Vice Chancellor over here. As a quick introduction, I did my BTech from IIT Kanpur and then an MBA from Bajaj Bombay. 20 years in the industry, working in consulting firms across the world, actually 10 different countries. And then the love of Solan and the love of education and teaching brought me back in. So that's quickly my background. You know your principal, so I don't have to introduce her. She is an extremely gregarious and charismatic lady. The first time I met her, I was so charmed, and I came back with lots of inspiration, ma'am. We also have Vivek Atre with us. Now, Vivek is a dear friend, visiting faculty with Shulini University. He's also an ex-IS officer. You've all seen the IT park in Chandigarh. That's been Vivek's baby. I think one of the few, or I think one of the many great achievements that Vivek has as an IAS, but more importantly, I think he does more exciting stuff today. He took a very interesting call of leaving the IAS, resigning from the IAS, and his love for teaching made him do that. So he is now a TEDx speaker, a motivational speaker. He writes books, he's an author, and we're very, very lucky that Vivek is also part of the Shulini family. I think with this introduction, ma'am, I'll request you to give a minute of your thoughts or what you'd like to cover, which Vivek will. But the topic really is, how do we inculcate values? It's a very important topic in today's times. At least I believe that what's happening today in this world is because as human beings, somewhere we lost our path to values, and the last 20 years, we just went absolutely crazy, killing environment, and just expanding in a very crazy way. And we thought, what better time to actually bring this topic up in times of today. We believe that our belief at Shulini is that values are the most important thing. And I think that's exactly what MRD, AV, and DAV, the whole institution sort of talks about, which is values. And that's going to be the topic. So I think with that introduction, I'll hand it over to you, ma'am. And after your 1 minute, we'll request Vivek to be gracious and take us through his charismatic talk of inculcating values in human beings and also in students.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khosla. Dear teachers, it is our privilege that today we are on this webinar where such educationalists are going to talk to us. And in the classrooms, I'd like to share, Atul, that we are facing a lot of problems when it comes to inculcating human values in the children. Absolutely. As you rightly said that in the last 20 years, what has happened is that slowly the value systems are degrading. So parents expect that the school should be the one taking the lead in inculcating the values. But when it comes to home, there is something missing out there. So we at school face a lot of problems. And when we are talking to these children, especially the children from 9th to 12th, and when we talk even simple things like be honest, the children, they reply back that no, more important is survival, and for survival, even if we have to lie, there is nothing wrong in that. So what we actually feel is that the values have, what the values which we used to talk about, say 20 years or 30 years ago, for the children, present children, the ones who are coming to our school, those values do not exist. I'll just give one example that during this lockdown period, we are receiving a lot of feedback from the parents that the students are not listening to them. You know, the students are also frustrated, sitting inside them, and because of these, you know, certain gaps in values, the teenagers are. It is becoming very difficult for the parents to handle their teenagers at home. So today's webinar is a very, very good opportunity where we would like to hear from Mr. Vivek Atre, uh, inculcating human values in present scenario in this generation where, you know, these children are hooked onto technology. For other things, for all other things are secondary to them. For them, it is just me, my smartphone, my comforts. Mr. Atre, over to you.
Thank you very much, Atul Khosla. And
I'll request, ma'am, you and me to stop our video before Vivek starts and mute ourselves.
thank you very much for the introduction, Atul, and the welcome. As always, it's a pleasure to speak for Shulini and to be a part of the Shulini family. It's a real joy to be carrying out these webinars. And thank you, ma'am Masuma Singha, for highlighting the key points that should be taken up in this webinar, in this talk. And I must tell you that when a chef prepares a menu and that menu is brought before the clients and the client chooses the item on the menu which is the favorite of the chef, then the chef has greater joy in preparing that dish for the client. So you have chosen out of a list of topics that I had floated through Shulini, and Shulini had sent to you one of my favorite topics, which is inculcating human values in children. And you have, therefore, I will be talking on this. And believe me, I can talk for the whole day on this topic, but we'll restrict this to about half an hour, 45 minutes. And there will be a little break where I will request Atul to show a video for 2 to 4 minutes in the middle of my talk. But let me highlight the topic and why we are here. I noticed that about 60 participants are already there on Zoom, and it's wonderful to have all of you. Welcome to this show, this talk. And this talk is going to be about human values and how to handle children and how we as teachers as well as parents, because we are also, most of us are parents, should be handling our children. So as Atul and Masuma ji highlighted, this is an era where a lot of fast-paced changes are taking place. And I wrote recently in an article, a column which I write for the Hindustan Times, it's called Random Forays. I wrote that man has not really covered himself with glory in the first 20 years of the new millennium. From 2000 to 2020, you can see a lot of degradation and deterioration in the environment, which is very, very fragile, which is very, very sensitive to whatever the human beings do. And we notice that this kind of mindless development and activity is going to create problems for future generations and is already creating problems for our generation. So we have to see how we can balance our development with environment protection. That is the first value which mankind has to see. And this, as Atul said, is probably a signal from the gods that this mass karma, which we have been accumulating in the last few decades actually, should basically make us think and rethink that what are we doing as a race or as a community, as a population? Are we going in the right direction? My guess is that we were going a little haywire, and going haywire also means not only environment degradation, but also personal degradation, personal decline of moral values. And we find that people started taking things for granted. And children who are not listening to their parents today, as the principal highlighted, are also taking their parents for granted. But it is also true that the parents are taking their children for granted at times. So let us talk about these things. The first thing is human values. Human values have been on the decline because we have started not caring. And as the principal said, children often say that it is the survival which is more important, material benefits, materialistic success, and running after prosperity, money, fame, power. These are the things which youngsters are taught to aspire for. And if they are looking for admission in a good college after school, they are basically looking for admission in that college so that they can get onto a career which gives them power, money, and fame. Now, if they get power, money, and fame through that college, through that career later, they are going to obviously be in a rat race, which everyone is in. And this rat race is all consuming, it is not sparing anybody. Everyone wants to be more successful than the next man. And that is leading to shortcuts, it is leading to dishonesty, it is leading to treachery, and it is leading to practices which are not called for. I spent 25 to 26 years in the IAS and HCS. I got promoted from the Haryana Civil Service to the IAS. Before that, I did my engineering, electronics engineering graduation from NIT Kurukshetra. And you can see the rest of my, whatever I've been up to in the last 26, 27 years on LinkedIn or wherever you search for me, you'll find me. But the point I want to make is that times have changed over the last 20, 25 years. And what has contributed to this change, unfortunately, is our generation. Now, I may be older than some of you, most of you, and it is possible that you are still a part of my generation. And we have become the first generation which could see the pre-technology era when we were growing up and the post-technology or artificial intelligence era, which is there now. So what happens is that we have started taking shortcuts in life ourselves. We have started spending too much time with technology. We have started spending less time with our parents, that is the children's grandparents. We have started perhaps taking each other for granted. Friends are not spending as much time in conversation. There are many problems which have come due to malpractices. And our generation, unfortunately, has encouraged these malpractices, and we have unfortunately told our children that you must win at all costs. And what are those costs? Those costs are human values. So that is what we need to reverse. We need to imbibe in our children, tell them that at all costs, we must maintain human values. And success is secondary to values and peace and happiness. This is something which children of today are not told, and how will they pick it up if they are not told? So the first point I'd like to take in the list of human values which need to be inculcated in these children, there is no secret. The first value is truth. It is truth. Now, truth is the same as 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. Truth doesn't change. What is correct is correct. What is incorrect is incorrect. There is hardly any shades of gray over there. There is very little doubt when we are doing wrong. When we're doing something wrong as teachers, as parents, we know in our heart that we're doing it wrong. We do it deliberately because we don't care, or we do not care for the consequences. When we do something wrong as parents and teachers, then children are bound to copy us. I give a very simple example. If somebody crosses the red light, there are many red lights in Chandigarh, Panchkula, where I live, not that many in Solan and Shulini, but whatever red lights there are, if we cross those red lights, then the children are watching us crossing those red lights. If the children listen to us telling somebody to tell someone else, tell that person that I am not available today. Tell him that I am away from here, I'm not here. It used to happen more in the landline era when mobiles were not there. But there are ways to tell untruths which are reflected in the children's personalities. As parents, our generation and generations after ours are not setting the right example for children to follow, because we are telling untruths and not telling the truth at times. And children do not listen to what we say, they watch what we do. So we have to be examples of propriety, of truthfulness, of doing the right thing when nobody is watching. So the first thing that I'd like to again encapsulate is our own character will be reflected in our children. Our the parents' character, the parents of children studying in your school, their character is reflected in the children. My wife runs a small school for toddlers in Panchkula. And she says that those children who keep biting each other, hitting each other, scratching each other, pulling each other's hair, when we call the parents because the child is doing all this, most of the time those parents are stressed out with each other, or they are very busy and the children are not being given enough time by them. So it is the parents who are inculcating in these toddlers as they are growing up the wrong habits by virtue of neglect or by virtue of malpractices themselves. The second value that we can talk about after truth is honesty, which is very much linked. Honesty is something I speak to young government recruits. I spoke to the Haryana Civil Services latest batch. I go to Mussoorie and speak to young officers there also. I tell them that when you enter the service, most of you have the heart in the right place. Most of you want to make a mark, want to make a difference in society, and you want to do things the right way. But 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, something happens. Something triggers dishonesty and something which changes in you. You watch your colleagues doing something wrong, you also succumb. When does a boy start drinking? A boy starts drinking when the boys are drinking. And that the other boys, they're like, chal yaar ek ghoont laga le types. And this boy succumbs to that temptation. And then he doesn't want to be known as a weakling or as a kind of moron or somebody who's, not part of the pack. So he wants to, therefore, prove himself to be part of the gang. But in case of dishonesty, it is a conscious decision. It is not an unconscious decision. We take steps which are dishonest in society because we want to take those steps and we don't care for the ramifications. When we stand in front of the mirror, we know that we have done something wrong. In Himachal, there are, fortunately, I know, this is my assessment, less dishonest people, more honest people. It's a great state, not because my wife is from Himachal. She also lived in Solan as a child and studied, I think, in St. Luke's school, I think. But not because of that. I am saying that Himachal has the opportunity to prove to the rest of the country that honesty can work, honesty can flourish. Another value that I want to talk about is forgiveness, forgiving others. What we do, we carry grudges in our heart. We carry hatred. Somebody said something to you 12 years ago. Now you're a teacher in a school. When you were a student, somebody said something wrong to you. You have not forgiven that person even today. Could be you were newly married, your mother-in-law said something. It could be a friend who said something, or someone else, and your boss said something. Whatever it is, you are still holding that grudge. That burden is on your mind, your heart. It is troubling only you, not anyone else. So that grudge needs to be removed. You need to mentally forgive that person. It may take 2 or 3 days to forgive someone at times, but it should not take more than that. Maybe something very serious has happened. Then also after a year or two, you forget, you forgive. Forgiveness is something which really matters. Another value that I'll talk about is equanimity. It's a little difficult word, but in Sanskrit, in the Gita, it says titiksha. Equanimity or titiksha means sambhav, which means that we are not jumping with excitement when we are victorious, and we are not morose and sad and feeling low too much when something goes wrong. I speak on this topic a lot, and nowadays this crisis has enveloped the world. It is our mind which is creating the fear factor and the worry factor. And this factor has led to our reaction, which is often depression or mental disharmony. We need to be positive and be strong. If we are able to do that, then we will have equanimity. Not that we need to do the bhangra like Harbhajan Singh used to do when he was playing. Every wicket that he took, he would do the bhangra. Now there is reason to do the bhangra at times on the cricket field. When you have won the World Cup, you have won the match, but not every wicket. So there has to be equanimity, which means balance. When something goes right, something goes wrong, we don't react too much to the extreme. We maintain a balance and calmness. And another basic value is to be humble. Humility. Humility is something which is an aura. It's a kind of piece of jewelry that you wear. The greatest humble person in public life that I have seen, Dr. Abdul Kalam, Dr. Manmohan Singh. You see them how humble, how beautiful their character, and how well they could carry themselves off being so dignified. I don't talk about current leaders. We will see after once they retire. We talk about leaders who are not leaders of our country at the moment. So therefore, we have to really go into a stage where we are trying to be humble despite all our accomplishments, despite all that we have done. We may be all powerful, we may be on top of the world, but humility shines through. In fact, greatness comes from humility. If you see a great cricketer like Sachin Tendulkar, humble. Virat Kohli, not very humble, but has become more humble, especially after he got married. But another thing, you look at someone like Yuvraj Singh. He has become humble now. He had to fight cancer. He spoke at Shulini University recently and before also. But in his early days, his collars were up. He could have gone to greater and greater heights in his career. Perhaps nobody told him this. So children of today, if they are taught these values in school, and you know that there is something called social emotional learning now. And social emotional learning is not only about information, it's not only about bookish knowledge, it is about personality, it is about values, it is about being all-rounders, having understanding of the world, empathy for others. Great value to have is empathy for the weaker person, to be asking someone who is poorer than you, looking after him or her, or helping the society in general. It is a great value to have social service-oriented thoughts. The next value, and perhaps the last point that I will raise before we'll take up something else, is creativity. Creativity is also a value. Creative people are actually better human beings. You notice this point. Creative people are better human beings. They will not shout so much. They will not lie so much. They will not be backbiting so much because their mind is absorbed in creative thinking. They are thinking of how I can make a better artwork, how I can perform better on the sports field, how I can be a better writer or a musician, or how I can be a better cook, whatever it is. So you as teachers, I often talk to teachers about balancing their lives. Find time for your own creativity and encourage children to also do that. If you inculcate this value in the children, teach them to think out of the box, teach them to think differently. So creativity is something which also Shulini University has taken up in a big way. And Shulini University is doing great research work with many patents. And water is one of the projects which has been taken up for creative pursuit by Shulini. I'm going to request Atul Khosla to show a short video on creativity that Shulini has encouraged in the water realm. Yes, Atul.
So good afternoon, friends. The reason why we thought we'll bring it up is because we believe that by pushing our students to think outside the box, to pushing them towards creativity, you can actually have them perform outstanding things, but also to bring great values into the way they live. So I'm going to show you a small video and then I'll speak for a minute before I hand over to Vivek. So give me half a second over here. Let me just share this video. Is it working?
Yeah.
You get the audio?
No sound.
the reason we wanted to show this video was because of the student that we're very, very proud of. Her name is Amanpreet. Aman comes from a very poor family in Punjab. She joined us for her bachelor's and then did a master's, and actually used to be a trouble child. She was a troublemaker till she actually got into working on something very productive. So she started working on moringa seeds. Moringa are nothing but drumsticks. So seeds from drumsticks, we found out actually have magical properties on water purification. So just to give you a sense, Aman has been superbly successful. She was awarded as a World Water Fellow. So out of 100,000, more than 100,000 students across the world who applied, she got the World Water Fellow. She went to Geneva as part of that. It was a UN-sponsored body. She also won the Tata and Lockheed competition of 25 lakh rupees for this invention. So here was a kid who was a troublemaker, came from a lesser privileged background, and suddenly did wonders, continues to do wonders. Her demeanor changed, her attitude changed the moment he brought in creativity and the moment he brought in success into her. Of course, we keep on telling her not to be, arrogant, continue to be modest, and she continues to do that. So that's one example of how do you bring in, values of becoming a better human being. So we do a lot of social projects, Vivek, at Shulini. Every student, every semester does at least one project on social welfare, social projects. For example, we have adopted the Manav Mandir Dystrophy Center, which some of you are aware of. So I would say, along with education, I think DAV does a lot of that. So do that. One last thing which I will say, Vivek, over here is Corona is actually a great time because students are spending more and more time with the parents. And hopefully, that disconnect that existed between parents and students will go away and more values will get inculcated in them. But over to you, Vivek. This is your day, your speech, not mine.
Thank you very much, Atul. And that really shows how creativity can turn around a child who used to be a troublemaker at home into a world champion in a way and has been to Geneva. So I would strongly advise the principal and the teachers to do more creative activities as much as possible in the system with the children. That will keep them away from dishonesty and anger. In fact, 3 more quick points which I'll give you before we take questions.
Can I make one point before you go, Vivek, because this is relevant over here?
Yeah.
A small experiment that I'm doing with my students at Shulini is having them record every day 2 minutes on a particular subject. In our world, in the management world, being aware of the environment or the news is very important. So we're basically telling our students, record it 2 minutes and send it over to us over WhatsApp. So that's another one example of things that teachers might want to experiment with.
In fact, if you do that, because as the principal was saying, that parents are finding it difficult to make their children listen to them also. So it's good to give them some activities from home, and sending videos is something they like also. It will be good. So another quality that I'd like to talk about is self-restraint. Human beings are tempted, human beings lose their temper, human beings get angry, sometimes some other temptation comes. And as teenagers or as growing up children, they face more of that. And distractions of social media, also you need self-restraint. So the child who actually restrains himself or herself from what he should not be doing and getting on to studying or playing or whatever should be done is the child who will be more successful. And to do that, what you can do is to counsel these children, of course, but also give them incentive. So parents should be told that if the child keeps off social media one day or minimizes social media, then give that child some kind of encouragement, a kind of outing once the lockdown is over, or some kind of chocolate or whatever it is, to not disincentivize, but to incentivize something is more important. So give a pat on the back to a child who is more constructive one day than usual. That is another way to do it. Another point that I'd like to really stress is the absence of anger. So anger is something which is self-defeating. Anger in teachers, anger in students, anger in parents. Anybody can be angry. It is something which does not really add value to our personality. Some people cannot help it. Their anger is uncontrollable, and it has become uncontrollable because they have allowed it to, and they don't care, because even an angry person, when in company of a boss or in company of formal people, will not lose the temper, will be very nice and dignified. But the moment the family is there, only family, only friends, then that person loses temper. So somebody like that needs to work hard, and needs to work hard during the lockdown, and at times when things are not that busy. Of course, some people are more busy during the lockdown than otherwise, but whatever time you find during an evening before sleeping, or at a time of prayer, pray to God to give you that balance, and not make you such an angry person. Anger doesn't give authority. Authority is something which is secondary to respect. So if we garner that respect, gather that respect, if we gather goodwill through our actions and deeds, then that is more important. So I'm going to be soon requesting you to ask questions, but I want to tell you a couple of stories now, while you think of your questions. The one story which I'll tell you is a story of a slightly thankless person. His name was Pedro. So Pedro was going for an interview, and 11 o'clock was the time for the interview. He borrowed somebody's car, and this was New York, when New York is not under lockdown, busy New York. He could not find a parking, and 11 o'clock became 11:05, 11:10, and the interview time was going away. He would have missed the interview. He could not find a parking for 20 minutes, and he could not leave the car in the middle of the road, otherwise his friend's car is gone and he would have to pay for it. So he, at 11:20, he realizes that no parking is available, doesn't know what to do with the car, and he will miss the interview. Finally, he realizes he should pray. So when man thinks, or women think that there is nothing else that works, then they pray. So Pedro prays to God, please God, find me a parking and I will give up drinking from tonight. So he promises God and he prays, and suddenly he finds a parking. He parks the car, locks the car, is rushing off for his interview. He looks up at God on the way and says, God, never mind, I found the parking. Which means he doesn't want to fulfill his promise. He doesn't think God found him the parking. Sometimes we like that. We become thankless. And if we are thankless to God, thankless to whoever has helped us, then that is not a value to inculcate in anybody. It is a thankless value. So we need to be thankful and grateful. It is something that we really, really will be very, very pleased to have. Another short story I'll tell you is the story of an old lady, and she was about 90 years old, and the taxi driver came to pick her up for the last journey. She didn't have any family, and was also in a Western society. And this 90-year-old lady was to be taken to the hospice. And the hospice is a place where patients live for a while because they're terminally ill, and later they cannot come back to the world, and they die over there. Because that care which hospice gives is a specialized care to people who are at the last stage of life. So this lady was ordered a taxi. She had taken care of everything else. Somebody had helped her to pack her bag. And this taxi driver comes, and this lady then sits in the cab, and he says, okay, should we go to the hospice now? She said, no, I want to drive around the whole city first. So the driver drives her around the whole city, and she remembers each and every point of her life, where she got married, where she got her first job, where she met her friend, whatever it was. She relives her whole life in that 4 or 5 hours in the taxi at night with the taxi driver. And then when she's tired, she says, let's go to the hospice. So when she reaches the hospice, the taxi driver is there, and she asks him, how much do I pay you? He says, you don't pay me. I want to pay you for teaching me the lesson of life. Each and every human being has a story, has a history, has a life, has thoughts, has emotions. We need to treat people with respect. We need to treat the lowest person, the powerless person, the oldest person, the youngest person with respect. And if we treat people like that, then they look up to us. And if you treat children like that as teachers, and each other like that, you will be loved. And when people start loving you and working for you, with you, because they love you, that is the best way to be as a leader. And not only because they are scared of you. So this is something which I must reiterate. The earning of life is not material success, power, money, or fame. It is goodwill, it is happiness, and success comes from happiness. Happiness comes from within. I must close before we ask questions by showing the cover of my book, which is Finding Success Within. And success comes, as I said, from within. This is my latest book. It was launched recently in Chandigarh, and Atul Khosla was there with the family. It is a book which is available on Kindle at the moment, but after lockdown will be available on Amazon. Why I'm showing you the cover of this book is that you must tell your children to read more. And by the way, congratulations to Atul and everybody. It's World Book Day today. And today is World Book Day, which means that we should remind ourselves as people who are already into life with that we should read that book which we forgot to read, or that book which we should have read sometime. And we should tell the children to read more. That will actually add a lot of depth to their life. And that's why I'm bringing up my book, Finding Success Within. It gives 52 tips for young children, which can make them successful and happy in life. And World Book Day, so one newspaper called me up and asked me, which book do you read? So I must also promote and tell you that this is the greatest book that I have read. It is called The Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramhans Yoganand. And it will tell you how to meditate, how to lead your life with balance. Some of you may have seen it, read it. But if you choose to read such books, great books, life will become better. Teachers should also keep on reading, and children must read as much as possible. I know they won't listen to you, but try and inspire them. I think, Atul, we should, I can go on and on, but it's probably time for taking some questions and we can interact with the teachers. What do you feel?
So I'll request Masuma ji to join us on the panel. And I think before we get into any Q&A, we'd love to hear your thoughts, ma'am, and any questions that you have for Vivek before we open it up to the audience. I'll also request all the teachers over here, we've got the chat bot on the right or the Q&A. Just shoot your questions, and delighted to have Vivek answer any.
Thank you, Atul. Mr. Atre, I would like to thank you for throwing light on such basic things which we tend to forget as adults also. We are talking of inculcating values in children. I feel we need to look inside ourselves also, and first need to make sure that all these things are there in us. Then only we'll be able to give it to our students. And you had talked of very basic things like a person should have absence of anger, self-restraint. Otherwise, mostly we are, revolving around the 5 basic values only. So it's just a very, very good thing, so that at least we can think differently. When you talked of creativity is something which we are doing, but now that means the teacher can give creative exercises altogether from a different perspective. So thank you so much for putting light on these things. At DAV, we are already working on values, developing ethics. We try to have weekly havans and many other things. Social activities are also done under the umbrella of Arya Samaj Samiti. And many of our children are a part of it, but still a lot needs to be done out here. My first question to you is that should human values be taught as a separate subject in school, or it should be a part of other subjects, integrated in the other subjects?
Absolutely, very good question, ma'am. In fact, it is so important to focus on values that we should do both. In fact, in our school days, we used to have something called moral science. And nowadays, you don't have moral science, you have something else. What is it called?
We have Naitik Shiksha.
Naitik Shiksha you have. So
yes,
what we used to have in those days was at least that subject gives the children a sense that this is something important, as important as maths, English, and history. So we must have one subject. Yet teachers should try and teach subjects along with moral values injected into that lecture somehow. So some story, some inspiration in English, history, Hindi, these are kinds of subjects where you can bring in these anecdotes which will give values. So even in maths, I don't know if you can, but whatever you can, you please bring in these into every activity. And you rightly identified what Atul and I had already said, that creativity will give them that edge and that focus will take them away from dishonest values. So yes, you must do both of them.
So I'll
Thank
just like to add one more thing, ma'am. I think one value that increasingly is getting lost is teamwork. Uh, I would try and encourage my professors, my teachers, my students to get into teamwork, because it's not just also a very important value to live life, but it's also a very important value to succeed going forward. Increasingly, professionals, increasingly successful people need to have the ability to not only lead teams but also work in teams, which we are seeing sort of a loss of. Everyone wants to be individual, or they want to work with people only that they like. So I think that's another area that, as a university or as a school, we can do much more, where we actually have them learn through teams, and it can be very, very valuable learning. So that's something that at least we are trying to do, and you might want to experiment.
Mr. Atre, I have one more question.
Yes.
It is a very common scenario. Like you said, that we all have to be role models. So it is not only the teachers; it is the people in the society also with whom the child is interacting. Now, when a child comes across conflicting situation, uh, is being taught that this is how you should be behaving, but sees something else. So there is a conflict in the child's mind at a very, very early age. It can happen at class 1 level also. Uh, how does one recognize that, or how do we go about it?
See, this is a very philosophical question, but a true question. You see, the world is a world of duality. The child will see right and wrong at the same time. And in every situation from class 1 itself, as you said, the child may start to tell lies or be taught to tell lies by an older child who will say, nahi, mummy ko aise nahi batayenge, aise batayenge. You know, that first introduction to dishonesty comes very early in life. Maybe you're playing cricket and nahi, out nahi tha, out nahi tha. You know, that kind of thing is something which will come in life. And temptations will also come. Falsehoods will also come. We cannot be immune to them. Each child will face these and has to grow up in this environment of good and bad both, good and evil both. So, but our parents and teachers can make them distinguish between right and wrong. Company also matters. So children in college or 11th, 12th class may be prone to smoking or drinking or gambling or whatever it is. So they know that it is wrong, but their company is such that that takes them to that path. So it is said that one of the greatest traits that you can, or greatest habits that you can adopt, is to seek the company of good people, because that aura flows onto you, whether bad or good. So I think we need to teach them to have the right company, to choose the right company and friends. We need to teach them what is right, what is wrong, and then they have to take a decision. And you also tell them, yes, you are human. You will make mistakes. We also made mistakes, but we try to be right most of the time. 9 times out of 10, we should not make that willful mistake.
Thank you, Mr. Atre. If the teachers have the question, maybe they can put it up.
There is a comment by Atul, and that is, it is not something to be taught through textbooks. It is something to be lived, and students shall follow suit. Follow suit. That's absolutely true. If teachers have questions, they can ask. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is to read out a quick list of 26 values from the Bhagavad Gita, and just one line, one word each. So you will just quickly pick it up. I can send it to Atul, and it will be shared with you also. Fearlessness, which means confidence, courage. Purity of inner psyche. Perseverance in the knowledge of yoga. Charity, self-restraint, sacrifice, study of the scriptures, austerity, honesty, non-violence, truthfulness, absence of anger, renunciation, equanimity, abstinence from malicious talk, compassion, freedom from greed, gentleness, modesty, absence of fickleness, splendor, and splendor means splendor of personality, forgiveness, fortitude, cleanliness, absence of malice, absence of pride. That means humbleness. So basically, these 26 qualities have been given by Lord Krishna to Arjun in the Gita. And I just picked up a copy before coming for this talk. But these are superhuman to be adopted in 100%, but we try to improve in every field.
This is absolutely amazing, Vivek. I mean, I never knew about this, so thank you so
Send you a
much.
copy.
If you could send us the list of these values, I think we'll also circulate it to all our dear friends on the talk today.
Let me see if I can do it while the teachers are asking questions. Let me see. Any questions?
I am not getting any questions. So once again, Masuma ma'am, thank you very, very much. Thank you, teachers of MRDAV school. It's been an honor to be with you today. We welcome you to visit Shulini. You know, we would have loved to actually host this at Shulini, like a picnic rather than do it over the web. But I guess these are difficult days, and we hope and pray that things get okay soon. I think before we close, Vivek, absolutely last thoughts from you. 1 minute last thoughts before we close for the day.
So the last thought is that in the ultimate analysis, we have to tell our children and also follow the same thing ourselves. What leads to a happy, successful life in the end? At the end of life, we will wonder whether we lived a good life or a bad life. So we, at that time, it will depend on the sum total of how we were. So it's a very philosophical thing, but what I feel is that we need to be on the right side of most things. We are human. You tell the children that you make mistakes at times, but don't go on repeating the same mistakes. And you cannot be perfect. Nobody's perfect, but we try to improve. That is the main crux of the matter. Keep trying to improve yourselves. Even grown-ups should keep trying to improve.
Thank you, Vivek. And once again, Masuma ma'am, anything that Shulini can do for the community, for your school, please don't hesitate. We're all in it together. If we can contribute back to the school, back to the people of Solon, we'll be honored and delighted. So please seek, let us know. And we'll, of course, seek help from you from time to time. So once again, thank you to all of you and wish you all good luck. We're all lucky to have beautiful weather. I think people in Delhi and Bombay are struggling. We also have a beautiful environment. So we should say thanks to that, to God, that we're not stuck in that 1,000 square foot apartment that most other people are in Delhi and Bombay. So let's hope and pray that things get well soon and meet all of you in person. Once again, thank you, Vivek. Thank you, Masuma ma'am, and wish you all a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.